What's up, you guys? It's MB Maniac here with you, and today I'm going to be going over my predictions for the 2016-17 NBA regular season standings in the Eastern Conference. If you're interested in checking out my Western Conference predictions, the link to that video is in the description below. So we're going to go across the map and cover the bottom 5 seeds, only this time we're in the Eastern Conference. And the bottom 5 seeds in the Eastern Conference, I think, is where they're still far inferior to the Western Conference, because even though the Western Conference, has to have teams that are, bad, as in, the 10th through 15th seed, they at least seem to have, direction and a future, while some of these teams in the bottom of the East, I really don't know what they're going for. So let's just jump right in. Starting off at number 15, we've got the lowly Philadelphia 76ers. I'm really sad that I have to kick off the rankings with having them at the bottom, because they've been here for the last 4 years and they just can't seem to get out of it, as they get draft picks year after year, and they haven't really worked out, and they've also just had a case of bad luck. As we look through the roster here, their best players probably Jahlil Okafor, the number 3 pick last year, averaged around 17 points a game. Looks like he's going to be a really good scoring center, but his defense is pretty bad, which is okay because they're going to pair him alongside Joel Embiid. And this is the kid I'm most excited to see on this team, because he's finally ready. It's been 2 whole years, and I've seen him play in preseason, and man, honestly, I didn't realize how big he was until I watched him play, and he's put on a lot of weight, and he just looks like he could actually be a pretty dominant center, so that'll be interesting to watch. Ben Simmons, if you didn't know, number 1 overall pick this year. He's been hyped up to be like this next amazing player. A lot of people think he's the next LeBron. He has good passing ability, but personally, I liked Ingram better in the draft anyway, because I thought he was more NBA ready and fit into the new NBA better because he can shoot. Because if you haven't heard, Simmons does not have a jump shot. As we keep going to the roster, Nerlens Noel. Now, he's actually, I think, a really decent center. He's really good around the rim, he runs, and he's really athletic and good at blocking shots. Unfortunately, there's just not enough playing time for him, and I do believe that out of the 3 centers they have, that he will be the one to get traded. Robert Covington, he's okay. He had a decent season last year, but I don't think he's going to develop into anything more than he already is. They also drafted Dario Saric, who I think was a good choice for them, because the thing this team lacks the most is a perimeter threat, and he can stretch the floor and shoot the long ball, and also has a pretty well-rounded game. I don't know if he'll develop into an all-star caliber player, but I do think at the very least he'll be a good NBA role player. They signed Jared Bayless, who is not a bad signing, but he's already gotten injured as well, as the bad luck train just keeps on rolling for the 76ers. That's kind of it for this roster, to be honest, as you see a lot of D-League level players here. And that's the main problem with this team is, even with the young talent they have like no veterans to surround them. And I just think this team will struggle for probably all season, like they seem to do every year, unfortunately. At number 14, I've got the Brooklyn Nets, and like the 76ers, this is a team that has been in the bottom of the conference for a couple of years now, and it all goes back to that trade they made with Boston, where they give up so many assets, and it didn't end up working out, as Paul Pierce and Garnett, are gone, Joe Johnson's gone, everyone's gone from that team. So that's really come back to haunt them as we start looking to the roster. They still have Brook Lopez, which is pretty impressive because he's an all-star caliber player, and I'm kind of surprised they haven't traded him yet, because they seem to be in rebuild mode. So I picture him getting traded. A lot of teams will be interested in him. He's still a really good center. They signed Jeremy Lin in the offseason, which I think is a smart move. We all remember Linsanity, and while I don't think he'll have Linsanity type numbers, I think he'll actually have, pretty good numbers for the season, as he'll have a lot of minutes, and he played really well in Charlotte last year, and I think Charlotte should have signed him, because if they did, I think Charlotte would be one of the top teams in the East. They have Bojan Bogdanovic as well, which is good, because it's always good to have a solid stretch 4 on your team. He's a pretty good 3-point shooter and does a couple other little things on offense as well. They signed Luis Scola, and I think they just signed him so that they had a veteran presence on the team. I don't think he'll start for them. I expect Bojan to start over him. He's getting old, 36 years of age, probably won't have too many minutes. And after Scola, the talent level really drops off here. You can look at these names. Grievous Vasquez, he was okay as a backup in Toronto, excuse me. And Randy Foye, you know, decent three-point shooter. Anthony Bennett, I can't believe they signed him. I don't know if you remember how bad this kid was his rookie year, but after I saw him play, I just thought he was done. So I'm really shocked that Brooklyn even took a chance on him. So after looking to the roster, you can see why this team was going to finish so low. They might even finish behind Philadelphia, so it'll be interesting to see which one of those teams actually falls to the last. But as of right now, I think they're a little above Philadelphia just because they're not as young. At number 13, I've got the Orlando Magic. Now, this team is a team that's kind of confusing me because I thought that they were going to stick with the youth movement, and I'm actually really surprised they traded Victor Oladipo because he was developing into a really nice player. Their best player is probably Nikola Vucevic, who is a really solid NBA player. I think he's underrated, actually. If you don't remember, a couple seasons ago, he had a really good fantasy season. I know that because he was on my fantasy team, and he had put up some crazy stat lines, and although he won't be able to maintain that kind of stat line, you know, throughout the season, he's still a serviceable center, and I think really good piece for the Magic here, as he's still only 25. You know, he's on a pretty nice contract, so we'll see if he develops into an all-star caliber player within the next couple years. Next, we have the man that they traded Victor Oladipo for in Serge Ibaka. Now, I don't think they should have traded Victor Oladipo, but not because I don't think Serge Ibaka is a good player. I just don't think it was a smart move because if you look, he only has 1 year left on his contract, and this team probably isn't going to be in the playoffs for a couple more years, so I could definitely see him leaving, which is why I don't think they should have traded him. He's probably, you know, not going to get much better from this point, but what he brings is, you know, three-point shooting, mid-range game, and blocks in the paint, man. Serge Ibaka. And he's gotten away from that a little bit over the last couple years, but he's still a really solid defensive presence. Next on the list, we have Eric Fournier. Now, I think the reason they traded Oladipo is because they think this kid is going to develop into a better player than him. And in their defense, they could be right. I think as of right now, Oladipo is a better player, but I have watched this kid play a lot, and he's good, man. He can score. He's a pretty good three-point shooter. I like the way he plays. You know, he's fast-paced. And, you know, he's probably going to run the show for them this year without Oladipo. So I expect him to have a really good season. And he might be an all-star caliber player one day just because of the way he can flat-out score the ball. I thought this was a bad signing. And I actually like Biyombo. He's really young. And I just love the way he plays. But they gave him a lot of money. And he's not even going to start for them. It's a hefty price to pay for a backup big man. So we'll see how this one pans out for them. Next up on the list, we have one of my favorite players, Aaron Gordon. I think this kid is really exciting to watch. He had a pretty decent season last year, and we all know what he can do on the floor. He's an insane athlete. I would like to see him work on his offensive game, as in shooting and being able to create for himself, but I definitely think, you know, he's a big piece of this puzzle, and they want to keep him around for sure because he's only 21, and I think his peak is all-star level because in the new NBA with all this running and fast-paced offense, you know, having a really athletic player like that is really important. So I think this year we'll see a big jump in his production. As we look at the next player on this roster, Jeff Green, I don't think he'll start for them, but he'll definitely be their sixth man, and that's a good role for him because I do like his game. You know, he can score, he's a pretty decent defender, and I think he'll actually thrive a little bit in this role, you know, so it's a good situation for Jeff Green as well. And the last player I'm really going to talk about here is Elfrid Payton. Now, Elfrid Payton was... And the last player I'm going to talk about here is Elfrid Payton. Me personally, I just don't think he's very well equipped to fit the new NBA. I thought Victor Oladipo and Eric Fournier would have made a much better backcourt, but that's just my opinion, you know. And that's going to do it for this team, really. They signed, you know, some veterans, Jody Meeks, DJ Augustine, CJ Watson, but none of those guys really played that well last year, so I don't see him making much of an impact on this team, as the rest of the rosters doesn't really matter. And honestly, this team, I think they have a bright future. They have a lot of young players, but I just don't see the direction they're taking these young players, which is why I think they're going to finish in the bottom of the Eastern Conference again. At the 12th seed, I've got the Miami Heat, And it's very unfortunate because this team actually could have very easily been a contender this year, you know, but they've had some bad luck, as we all know of the unfortunate story of Chris Bosh, you know, the blood clotting. And, you know, it's pretty much been publicly made that, you know, he's not going to play for the Heat anymore. They lost D. Wade, you know, Pat Riley wanted to go with the youth movement, so he didn't pay Wade. I thought he should have, because I think Wade has been so important to that franchise and that he deserved a contract. The big move that they made this summer was retaining Hassan Whiteside, and I think that was really smart because he's already one of the best centers in the game. Definitely a defensive player of the year candidate, so expect him to have a big jump in statistics. I think he's going to be starting center in the Eastern Conference because I just think he's so much more dominant than any of the other bigs. Next up, we have Goran Dragic. I think he is a really good player as well. Definitely not what he was a couple years ago, you know, when he was an all-star level talent. And he's 30 now, so I don't think, you know, he's going to be improving much. The best thing about him is he likes to run, and that's a perfect point guard to have when you have a group of young guys like Justice Winslow, who is a really good defender. He's really young. Pat Riley likes what he sees in this kid, and I gotta tell you, so do I. I think he's going to develop into an all-star caliber player, to be honest, not only because of his defensive presence, but I think he could develop into a scorer. They also signed Tyler Johnson again, and I think that was another smart move because I think in a couple years, you know, when Dragic is out of Miami maybe, or as he starts getting older, he'll take over that starting point guard role, and this is kind of similar to Aaron Gordon. You know, he's super athletic, he loves running the floor, and he's a good defender, except he can also shoot threes, which makes him very valuable in this year's NBA. So I think it's really smart that they kept him. Josh Richardson, another young piece. I don't know if he'll start for them, but I think he's a really good bench player to have because he just comes in and kind of knocks down shots and puts some points on the board. So I think Pat Riley's going with the rebuild process, which I can see why he thinks it's a smart move. I still think they should have signed D-Wade, but nonetheless, the future looks really bright for this team. Derek Williams, you know, he was a solid player for the bench on the Knicks last year. And that's it. Ben Udre, you know, he's pretty old. You know, James Johnson. I mean, you get the idea here. You know, a lot of young players that are going to be playing a lot of minutes for this team this year. And they'll probably struggle a lot in the beginning of the season. And I think they'll improve as the season goes on. But the Eastern Conference is getting a lot tougher this year, so I just don't think this team can go much higher than the 12th seed. So to wrap up part 1 of my Eastern Conference breakdown, I've got the 11th seeded New York Knickerbockers. Now on paper, it looks like this team would be an Eastern Conference contender, but if you watch the NBA, you know that the history of a lot of these guys is full of injuries, and that's the main reason I think this team is going to finish so low. You know, if somehow they can, you know, prove me wrong and all stay healthy and play, you know, 72 to 74 games a piece, then, you know, I think they could finish higher, but I just don't see that happening as we look through the roster. Carmelo Anthony, he's getting up there in age at 32 years old. I watched him in the preseason, and he hasn't looked bad, but I do notice that he's a little step slower. He's had injury problems the last couple of years, and as he gets up in age, you wonder if that's going to continue to persist. He's still an all-star caliber player when he's healthy, but I just don't know if he can stay healthy for most of the season. Now, the reason that Knicks fans should be really happy even if the season doesn't play out is they can at least focus on the development of Kristaps Porzingis, who had an amazing rookie season. You know, a lot of people questioned this pick when they drafted him last year, and he proved them all wrong. You know, he's a really talented guy. You know, he's like 7'3", which is crazy, but he can shoot the 3 ball. He can post up. You've seen his putback dunks. He's really athletic. Definitely going to be an all-star caliber player. Maybe not this year, but certainly next year I think he'll be on the all-star team. So it'll be fun to watch him progress and see what kind of numbers he puts up this year. Derrick Rose. Now, the trade they made for Derrick Rose was actually a smart trade because he only has 1 year, $20 million left on his contract, and I think they know that most likely he's not going to be healthy for the whole season. But you know, if he does surprise us and even gets back to that old Derrick Rose form, you know, it's smart because then they can re-sign him long term. You might as well take the risk because this team has been lacking a quality starting point guard anyway, and Derrick Rose is still a starting caliber player. even if he's not what he used to be. Now, the big offseason signing they made was Joakim Noah. Now, their big offseason move was signing Joakim Noah, and they signed him for 4 years, $72 million, which I think is a little steep. Again, just like Derrick Rose and Anthony, I don't think he's going to stay healthy for all season, and I could definitely see him missing a good chunk of games, which is really going to hurt this team. And that's kind of, the theme with this team. I just don't think their stars are going to be healthy. They also signed Brandon Jennings, and I think this is a smart signing as well because they signed him for only 1 year, $5 million, which is pretty cheap in the current NBA. And he's just going to come off the bench and provide scoring for them, which I think is a perfect role for him. I think his days as a starting point guard are done, but I think he could still be a good six-man, for teams that are even contending. And the rest of these guys are D-League level talents. So nothing much left, and if I knew they were all going to stay healthy for the whole year, I'd probably have them at the 3rd seed, but the fact is, Rose and Melo are a little older. Joakim Noah is coming off a couple seasons where he's been hurt a lot, so I just think that the injuries are really going to hurt this team, and in the middle of the season when, 1 or 2 of these guys go down, you'll see the losses start to pile up and kind of knock them out of that playoff picture, which is unfortunate, but they still have a bright future with Porzingis, so we'll see how this plays out, but I just don't see this team getting into the playoffs. Alright guys, so that's going to wrap up part 1 of my Eastern Conference standings predictions. I will be releasing part 2 hopefully within the next couple of days. And as always, any questions, comments, or disagreements you have, let me know in the comment section below. And as always, signing off, NB Maniac out.